Get ready for news from Lenovo, IT by Design, and MSP360 with guest host Randolph Carnegie, plus a special guest interview on the latest ransomware research with Dan Schiappa and Chester Wisniewski from Sophos. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 159, down on CloudBerry Farms. Hello, everyone, and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 159. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And when I say you, I mean people like you. But you probably want to know who you are. You're the VARs, the integrators, the IT consultants, the IT resellers, the MSPs, the MSSPs, the kinds of businesses that usually involve lots and lots of letters and acronyms. So the more of those you have, the more likely you are in the right spot. So welcome. We are glad to have you here. Joining me this week and most weeks is the partner in crime with no sport coat today. I have to add. He's wearing just a black T-shirt, but looking sharp as always with the bookcase and the stuffed iguana behind him, which we're going to ask him about because I want to make sure he's caring for his iguana. Executive editor Rich Freeman.
Hey there. Yeah, no, it's a rare thing for me to leave the sport coat off, but it's actually summer in Seattle right now, and it would just be way too warm for me to have a second layer on.
That's interesting because it's summer in Seattle, but it's like 55 degrees here. Now, how does that work? Rich, how does that work?
I don't know. It seems unfair.
It does seem unfair. I was expecting you to be a meteorologist or something like, well, Matt, the air masses from the polar north.
I mean, and it could be worse. Didn't they get like a foot of snow in Denver overnight or something crazy like that?
I imagine they get a lot of snow there in Denver, though, right? But yeah, I guess it is kind of early. Usually, it's like
a little early.
Yeah, it is a little early for that. How is the iguana?
Well, let's see. There is the iguana. And do you recognize what's towards the other end of the shelf there, that little bit of red and white?
Oh, yeah, good. The Rockford Ice Hog Sock Monkeys up there, your bobblehead.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it is prominently displayed. Excellent stuff. Rich, but as most people know, we are not alone. Well, people wouldn't know that yet because we haven't introduced him yet. But we have a guest host joining us today, and I'm really excited to have him here. It was kind of a last-minute scramble to get him on, so I'm really glad he was able to make it. And his name is Randolph Carnegie. He is a 30-year industry veteran who serves as managing director for Ken-Kor Consulting, which is a consulting and implementation company that helps small and medium businesses implement solutions to achieve their business goals and objectives. We thank him for joining us as our guest host today. Hello, Randolph.
Hello there. How are you guys? How's Matt? How's Rich? I am so sad I do not have any props behind me other than a wonderful screen. But had I gotten some more notice, I would have gone out and shot something and stuffed it and put it behind me.
Well, Rich's iguana is not of the shot and stuffed variety. It is merely of the plushy variety.
Okay.
Which, as many of our listeners know, that it's a kind of a long, funny story. That Rich can tell in 5 seconds because I'll take an hour if I tell it.
Let's make it the 10-second version. Basically, is that I once claimed to have a pet iguana on this show as a joke, which Matt did not actually realize was a joke for a long time. And then when he found out, first of all, it blew his mind, and then he gave me a stuffed iguana so that the story would be true. Now I do have a pet iguana.
I got you.
And he's a very easy iguana to take care of. He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, and there's no cage or anything to clean up. So it's the perfect kind of iguana pet for someone who traveled, or I should say used to travel as much as Rich.
Well, Matt, if you're used to fulfilling wishes, I'd like you to know that I have a safe behind me with $100 bills in it.
We'll definitely keep that in mind. But I like your backdrop. We learn a little bit about mini blinds and perforated windows. So Randolph, I'm excited to have you on because we've known you for a while. Tell us a little bit about, where you're from. Tell us a little bit about you, what you like to do, and a little bit about your company.
I'm originally from Jamaica, and this year actually marked the 54th year that I migrated to this country. And I've been in the IT business for over 30 years. I actually got into it accidentally from the point of view that I was working for a company back in the 80s, and they bought a computer in for a department of 42 people, one PC on the desk that was put down for us to use. And being somewhat naturally curious, I actually started tinkering around with it. And there was one other guy there who was really into the stuff. And so he would share information with me, and I acquired my knowledge one day at a time. And it just so happened that whatever I studied on Tuesday, someone would ask me about it on Wednesday. So I became the de facto expert. And little by little kind of picked it up, and it just, people started asking me questions. And so I really got into it. I got into the business solving people's quest for knowledge. And the technical part of it came later on, doing more of the technical part. But the entire impetus of getting into this was just to help people and solve problems.
So interesting. It's funny. We hear that story more often than you think. How I was working in the 80s or the late 70s, and the company got a computer, and I ended up being the one that messed with it, and here I am today. With a huge computer consulting business. That's so interesting. So what brought you to the U.S. from Jamaica? What spurred that migration?
In the lighter sense of it, what brought me here was a need to keep a roof over my head. My parents said they were migrating and said, "You want to come or you want to live in a tree?" So I opted to go with them. I was a young kid at the time. So I came here, and after I got here, it was my freshman year of high school. And so I moved around the country a bit. I've lived in New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Texas, and now I'm in Illinois. So it's been a good ride. Yeah. But that's kind of how I ended up here.
Living in a tree may not be bad. If it's like a cool tree house, maybe with plumbing, that may not have been so bad.
54 years later, I'm not sure I made the right decision,
You ended up in Illinois. I mean, come on. Yes. And I can only say that because Randolph and I are about an hour and 30 minutes apart. So we know.
But by living in Illinois, though, even though I didn't grow up here, it actually helps to authenticate the story of walking uphill both ways in the snow to get to school.
That it does. Well, very cool. So tell us a little bit about Ken-Kor Consulting and what you do there.
Well, Ken-Kor primarily works with smaller business. When I say smaller, I mean 50 and under. That's kind of our target group. We work with them to basically increase and help them maximize and be productive with their computers. We've gone from the point of I've been in business long enough to have gone from the point where the computer was an accessory to now it's a necessity. Everyone's got them on their desk, but if you remember the old days, someone would be at their desk and they'd walk to the computer to do something, then they'd go back to their desk and do the rest of the work. I remember how excited I was to get my first email address. If you can remember that. And if you can recall going back to when people would get email addresses that would not include their name because they didn't want anybody to know who they were. Rich can probably remember that. What's your first email address, Rich?
So my first email address was, I had a CompuServe account. You will remember CompuServe. A lot of people, yeah. And I don't know if you remember how those email addresses worked. Your email address was basically your account number at CompuServe.com. So I couldn't even possibly reconstruct it for you. My first address was something like 1054,172 at CompuServe.com.
I'm a little younger, Randolph. Mine was a Yahoo address when Yahoo started doing their free email service. And believe it or not, that I won't give the name of it out on the show, but it was derived from a nickname that I was given at the time. I was about 16, I think, at the time.
Yes.
And I still have that account. I don't use it as my primary account, but I still have that account today.
Yes. I remember those when email addresses were funny, were funny things that whatever people thought was funny. But it's but keeping going in the business, and it's, we've got, at this point, you've got generations that have been in the business, about every 20 or 25 years is what they call a generation. But it still amazes me sometimes when I go in and I'm working with people in an organization and they are so used to doing that one task that they have been assigned to do, that when you say, okay, open a browser, and they will say to you, I don't have a browser. Because, they may go straight into the program, but some of the things that you might think everybody should know. So being in the business, we come up and all these things that are common to us, but it's still surprising to me sometimes when I find people and they don't do it. The other one too is when you go into a situation where some of the users are older and the men never took typing. So they're, each letter or everything in the email takes more effort than anything else because each key has been attacked. but it's an evolution. And then I turn around sometimes and I might have problems doing something, and my kids just come by and go, they just quickly hit it, particularly if it's a new apparatus, or, new iPhone, new iPad or something. And the programs that they use, it's, oh, Dad, get with it, get this. And I go like, well, I've been at this business longer than you. And they go, yeah, but what you need to know, nobody cares about, what you have stored up in your information base, nobody cares about anymore. So it's a process.
That's very much my experience with social media, by the way. Those are the moments when I feel really old.
Yes.
TikTok, what are you talking about? I don't get it. It's
yes.
So, same story.
Mm-hmm. Same story. I've stayed away from TikTok. I don't want those. I don't want the Chinese to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in a normal year, Randolph, by this point in the year, I would have seen you on the road at a few conferences at least, and we would have caught up face to face. This has not been a normal year. So
No.
what's it been like for you and Ken-Kor?
It's been different, because one of the things that we've discovered during the course of this year is how much of your business, at least in our case, how much of our stuff has to be done after hours. Because during the course of the day, people are on their machines, you can't bother them. It's not that thing where you'd go into an office and you would do something if necessary during the day. Pretty much it's like, I got to get this done. You got to do this after hours. So shifted part of our workday to, a little bit later in the day or starting earlier. In terms of the travel part, I do miss that. It used to be that I would be in my parents lived in Orlando. So there'd be some kind of conference in Orlando or somewhere in the Florida area. I tie that in with a visit to my parents. Then I'm in Chicago. Someone would come into Chicago. And I have a daughter that lives in LA. So within those three things, conference would happen, and, you could tie something on, visit your kid or whatever it is. But this year it's just been different. And all these virtual conferences, it tends to wear you out a bit, because you're literally sitting in place. And what you also begin to discover about yourself, at least in my case, is how many of these conferences I actually went to and enjoyed meeting the people more so than I looked at some of the content at the conferences. You do miss that situation where you guys would meet in the hotel lobby or meet in the bar or whatever it is, and you'd learn so much and you'd form so many different relationships. But it's just not the same thing on Zoom. The bad jokes just don't fly as easily when you're sober.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I hadn't, really sort of worked in that specific angle. I was going to say the big difference between the virtual conferences and the in-person ones is that networking aspect. But also, you're sober the whole time.
Yes, you're sober, and you're trying to sit there and pretend that you're serious.
Right.
And go ahead.
That's funny. I mean, not being sober is a pretty easy problem to fix.
Yeah, but it doesn't look, you see now, when you're at the conference and you're not sober, you're among friends and no one will reveal that. But boy, you show up not unsteady on Zoom and the world will know, man, he is slushed and drinking at home. So, we have a reputation to maintain. Yeah. But but you do miss it though. And you suddenly realize, at least in my case, I don't care how big your place is. You suddenly realize how small it's become because you're just so used to being out there. And it's different. It's definitely different because I guess I would probably be on an airplane at least once a month. And it felt good. And now I just try to find ways to, to get out and do that. Walking to the grocery store now is exciting.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's my big excursion for the week.
Yes.
Actually, is going to the grocery store. Yeah. And then the other trick that I've learned, because I live in a fairly small condo in downtown Seattle. And the other trick I've developed is just kind of moving my laptop from one room to the other. It's almost like you're working someplace new. I'll just use that room for a few hours now.
Yeah. What I've actually done is between at my home, I have actually set up workstations in every room. For those days when you don't leave. So I will literally go in the front room or one room that looks out on the street and get a different view. Then I'll go in the kitchen and get a different, the dining area, get a different view. But there is literally a workstation and they're all different. They're all different. They're not all at the same speed or anything like that, but they're all different. But I do have one place where I sit and do most of my work. But sometimes you just want to move around.
Yep.
Mm.
Now, one of the things I ask most of the channel pros I speak to these days. So, presumably all your customers are working from home, or most of them are working from home now, and you went through that whole period of having to deal with that crash requirement to work from home. I mean, how have the cloud computing solutions that you offer, the security solutions how has your technology package, if you will, changed now that there's this totally different sort of work requirement?
Pretty much the way I had been working before is the management and the owners, because when you're working with smaller entities, in most cases, you're working with the owners, okay? And pretty much in every situation I had, the owners already had remote access from home or wherever they were. If they traveled, they wanted remote access, so they had that. When the pandemic hit, we just had to expand it out to the rest of the work staff. But several of my clients are in essential businesses, so they still have to go into their facilities. I've got a client that's got a big manufacturing concern, and they've got equipment that's taller than I am, several stories higher. They're not exactly bringing that home. But the number of devices that are under management has increased somewhat, because some people have to go out and get remote devices. But they're all spread out all over the place now. And that is the difference. It used to be that you just go to the office and fix everybody's machine or whatever it is, or do whatever you need to do. Now people are calling you from home on godly hours or whatever. And the other thing too, since they're working from home, they don't always necessarily work the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. Some of them will log on at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes you actually get texts or emails saying, "How do I do this? How do I do that?" into the hours of the evening. But it's been for the most part, it was very rough in the first first month or two, and a lot of people went into this thinking that this was going to be a 90-day lockdown. I mean, how many of you actually, it's like, okay, for 90 days, I don't have to do my laundry. I can just keep buying new clothes, until the pile of dirty clothes gets to be higher than, taller than you. But so that was the attitude going in, short-term solutions. And so we would, we took care of that, but now it's extending and becoming a permanent part, and people are actually thinking about staying that way. I've got one client who decided that in November, when their lease expires, that they're not going to renew. They're just going to go totally remote. So, that's my first client who actually says, I want to go totally remote, get rid of the office completely. So that brings on new challenges trying to get it all done, because, we haven't gone through that before. So it's everyone's learning how to do something a little bit different. Yeah.
Definitely, there is going to be a huge rush to get rid of office space for a lot of these companies who've realized, you know what, we can do it remotely. Heck, I mean, Rich, even ChannelPro is that way. We just got rid of our office space in North Carolina because we just realized we don't really need it.
I think to some extent, though, that things will go in cycle. The idea is like, Rich talked about he's working out of a small space, small apartment in downtown Seattle. I can almost guarantee you that when Rich got that space, he didn't think he was going to be working out of that place 8 hours a day. If he had, he might have gotten, look, I need a distinct workplace, because it gets old after a while having to clear out the dining table so you could work, or having to clear out the dining table so you can eat. That gets old after a while. So I think we'll see cycles, and I think eventually people will tire of the isolation and say, look, I'm only going to work for somebody who's got an office. But for right now, everyone's thinking that working from home is great. But I'm beginning to hear some people say this is getting old.
I could see that. I could see that. I guess there are some people like Rich and myself who are used to it because we've done it for so long. But I do see how the novelty could wear off for those who are not used to it.
Yeah.
And the buzz that I'm starting to pick up is that people are realizing that for certain projects and certain processes that require a lot of teamwork and collaboration, it's just harder to do that on Zoom or Teams or whatever. And so I suspect it'll be a mix. Most of what I do, I can do on my own. So I'll keep working. Where am I going to go anyway? But I mean, people who are like me will continue working from home. And then people who really kind of need to be interacting on a much more frequent basis with coworkers, I think will spend more time in the office maybe than others. And for for a lot of people, it'll be a little of this and a little of that. That we're on in crunch time on some project, so I need to be in the office the next 2 days. But next week I can do pretty much everything I have to worry about from home, and it's going to be a mix.
And when the Starbuckses and Paneras and McCafes open back up, there'll be lots more people there.
But now, Rich, you said you work from home, but a part of your work is traveling. Okay, so I trust that when you got this job, whenever it might have been, you didn't think you would be home 8 hours a day.
No, it has definitely been an adjustment. And I mean, I'm not getting claustrophobic in here, and I do have a room that is a office / guest bedroom and so on. But this is not a normal year for me.
And it's good you have your iguana now to keep you company. Otherwise,
I do.
you've gone mad by now.
And a sock monkey.
And a sock.
Oh yes, the comfort creature comforts of home. Yeah, great.
That's awesome. All right, well, we got to move into news. But Randolph, I'm really glad that you're here with us. So you're going to be on with us for the whole show. Please feel free to chime in and give your opinion on anything and everything. And thanks again for being here. So we'll
thank you for inviting me.
We're going to move into our first story. Which is about Lenovo, Rich. They have, let's see here, a word that we often see associated to Lenovo, which is hyperconverged infrastructure. This is something they've done before. We've covered plenty of it, but now they have something that's for the new, smarter normal. And I have a question about that, but I'm going to let you tell me about it first.
So this is the most recent addition. So gosh, it's got to be 2-3 years ago. Lenovo introduced their Think Agile product family. So we're familiar with the Think Server and the Think Book, and they introduced a whole new Think product family called Think Agile that was really all built around hyperconverged infrastructure. And so they added some new products to that, actually quite a number of new products to that just within the last couple of weeks here. And I'll get into a few of the details, but really what's kind of significant about it, they're saying that these are products for the new smarter normal. So we were just talking about what that new normal looks like and how much work from home is involved in that. And when people are working from home, you've got to be doubly conscious about security. And one of the ways to keep a work from home employee more secure is to get them onto a virtual desktop. It makes them both more mobile and allows them to connect to their resources wherever it is they choose to work, office, home, both of the above. But it can also be a much more secure environment than remoting, say, into a remote server or something like that. So we are seeing, virtual desktop infrastructure become more popular. Products like Windows Virtual Desktop become more popular. And now, for companies that want to deliver that kind of a solution on their own infrastructure, there's a whole new wave of hyperconverged infrastructure products really kind of optimized for VDI, among other workloads, from Lenovo. Now, the model with Lenovo is a hardware company. They have no interest, for the most part anyway, in becoming a software company. Around the margins, you'll see some software in areas like education and so on, but they don't have their own hyperconverged infrastructure software platform. So they partner with big names in the industry that do, and that's the case with this new product wave. So they have a series of devices that they call their Think Agile HX series that they developed with Nutanix, huge name obviously in hyperconverged infrastructure, kind of typical of what you'll see with the other product sets that they have. So they have another set that is specifically optimized for Microsoft's Azure Stack hyperconverged environment, and some products that they did with VMware if you want to build a high-density virtual environment around their stack. The Nutanix products come with AMD EPYC processors, which is interesting. 2 sockets, up to 64 cores, up to 2 terabytes of memory, all in a 1U form factor, which is kind of nice. There are editions of these products available with dual NVIDIA T4 GPUs. But the sort of theme that connects all those different specs together, obviously, is the understanding that a VDI workload is IO intensive, and it's going to take more resources. You'll see in a lot of these products, Lenovo announced that the specs are pretty robust, actually, to be able to handle that kind of a workload. But you know, it's a sign of the times. VDI, that technology that has always been on the horizon but never really gone mainstream, is really starting to gain steam and make its way into the mainstream now. And I'm sure Lenovo was working on these products before that trend was really accelerated by coronavirus. But you know, you're going to see, I think, a lot of products like this that are really just designed to help end users accommodate that particular workload and other demands of work from home kinds of computing.
Yeah, so I know a lot of their initial hyperconverged solutions were all based up with Nutanix. I know they have a very good partnership with them. And Lenovo, you're right, they don't do a ton of software in this, just in general, really. Where some of their competitors like HP do tend to try to go their own route a lot with that kind of stuff. So we know that there's differences in that. So, but they also, you mentioned that they have like an Azure Stack one now, and they have some VMware. I don't know a lot about their VMware solution. Is that something that's well used or out there a lot?
You know, I actually couldn't comment on adoption for any of these. You know, how actually for any of these families. I don't, you know, it would be hard for me to make any estimate about, you know, like market share and so on and so forth, even for the Nutanix products, which, like you say, are the ones that have been out on the market for the longest period of time. For what it's worth, the new VMware products that they announced are actually tailored not so much to VDI as to SAP's HANA database. So another kind of, you know, demanding workload that requires good solid specs. And you know, these products are kind of stacked up enough with resources to handle like 4 good solid HANA virtual machines per device. But I don't know, and actually I would have to go back and look and see how long they've been partnering with VMware. I know this, I'm nearly certain these are not their first products with VMware, but I'm not sure how long VMware has been part of the Think Agile scene.
Yeah, so Randolph, do you do a lot of consulting or solutions recommendations with Hyperconverged?
No, not at this. You know, not at this point. We haven't really been doing any of it to speak of. You know, we've got some people who are operating in the cloud, but for the most part, it's something that we're just doing more and more of. But we have not had much to do with that at all. So in terms of that, but I seem to recall though that when IBM sold off their hardware business to Lenovo, they sold them the machines or the manufacturer of the machines, but not the software side. So is this something where Lenovo is now trying to infringe a little bit on the software side or go in there? Because didn't IBM keep the software part separate? That's hitting some memory cells that might have been deteriorated by drinking in conference bars earlier on. But you know, I'm not sure, but I think so.
I mean, that does sound familiar. I mean, it wouldn't have been like Hyperconverged. It wouldn't have been infrastructure actually. Software. Yes, I mean, and it doesn't. I have seen Lenovo get more interested in software in the last 18 months to 2 years. I kind of hinted at, you know, education software. I mean, they have some stuff that they do that is not purely hardware based these days.
Yes.
But I haven't really seen that so much on the infrastructure side. I think with the Think Agile line, the model is still, we'll go out and partner with the big names in the industry and let them kind of do what they do best, the software, and it'll, you know, our contribution will be all around the hardware.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, very cool. So, and as you said, a lot of these new Nutanix ones, they run on Epic processors. You said interesting. Why did you say interesting?
Well, I guess it's not surprising anymore, but it feels like for the longest time, whenever I would get a press release about, you know, a product launch like this, they would talk about which Intel processors they're using and then say, you can also get it with an AMD processor. You know, we have that option for you. And this was interesting because that's pretty much how they do it, is with the AMD processors, and it wasn't like the, you know, the second choice if you want it. This is how they engineered it.
Yeah, 64 cores in, depending on which obviously model you look at, but 64 cores in the the multi-thread capabilities of these EPYC processors, and even just in the EPYC line, anything on the Zen architecture is it's pretty amazing with how much data they can crunch with one piece of silicon. So not not maybe as surprising to me, but definitely worth noting that the AMD stuff does tend to be right now in a lot of cases the lead in hardware for these than not. So cool stuff. I'm not sure I have a whole lot else to really talk about them. If you do a lot of Hyperconverged, we will put a link to this story as well as any news story that we talk about on the show notes page for episode 159. If you're listening on your phone or while you're on the go, you can go to channelpronetwork.com, find the episode page for 159. Usually they're easy to find. And then you can get all the links there. If you're watching on YouTube, open up the description area and we'll put all the links in there for you as well. So if you're into hyperconverged infrastructure and you want to learn about the latest and greatest from Lenovo, we'll put that there, and there's all kinds of more information and detail and links to learn about them. Now, Rich, I want to make one question about this, because I don't know if there's a connection here or not, but they did a lot of revisions to their partner program not all that long ago. Is this hyperconverged stuff like rolled into some of those new programs?
I believe that if you are in their data center, the DCG Data Center Group Partner Program, that these products would be part of what's available, to you at discounts, et cetera, through that.
Okay, good. So make sure you check that out too, and contact your reps at Lenovo to learn more beyond that. So we're going to move on to our next story. It by Design. I assume you mean that psycho killer clown that is stalking the industry, right, Rich? No, that's a IT by Design introduces partner enablement. Yeah, that clown wouldn't enable anything other than death. And operational improvement resources. Rich, tell us about that.
So this is interesting stuff too, actually. So IT by Design is a company that for a number of years here has been, they specialize in two things basically, or have been known for two things. And one is providing outsourced network operations center and help desk assistance to MSPs. The other is providing both temporary and long-term staffing assistance. So, what do they know about? They know a whole lot about recruiting and managing and motivating people. And they know a whole lot about running a state-of-the-art managed services environment, because they need to do that to run their business. And they, in order to maximize profitability, they want to do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. So what they announced a couple of weeks ago, they have essentially begun to productize this expertise that they've been accumulating through the years. So they have this whole new venture that they rolled out, which is it's not about the services that I was talking about before. It's really about sharing what they have learned about being successful in managed services with MSPs. So that the sort of core of this new offering is something they're calling Build It University, or Build IT University, Build It U, which is a partner enablement platform, as well as a partner community. So, I mean, tons of training resources basically built into this online university, and they've got it organized across what they say are the 9 essential elements of success in managed services, which is culture, finance, HR, leadership, marketing, sales, security, service, and strategy. So pretty broad spectrum of topics that they cover. Interestingly enough, a lot of those courses are taught by executives from vendors that IT by Design partners with. So LionGuard, Rapid Fire Tools, Datto, ConnectWise, executives from those companies have all kind of contributed some of the courses in the university. It's a little like a master class for MSPs in that regard. But some other totally, and I'll point out as well that folks in Build It University have access to peer groups as well. There are obviously other organizations that do peer groups, but here's another peer group entry available. Some other totally unrelated, but thematically similar things that they announced. There's a new consulting service they offer called MSP Compass, which helps MSPs develop a longer term, like a 3 to 5 year blueprint for optimizing their internal tools and processes. The IT by Design folks are going to kind of share what they know about a well-run, back end and help desk and operations center, et cetera, and help put people on a path over the course of 3 to 5 years to implement some of those best practices in their own environment. There is a software product. It's actually not out now, but it's coming out later this year. It's in beta right now. And they're calling it a performance management application. The name will be Team GPS when it comes out. But the idea there is, again, they know a whole lot about managing and motivating people, and they've created an application. It's their first software product ever that pulls together a lot of these learnings that they've accumulated over the years and kind of steps you through them. It sort of, helps you create a roadmap for optimizing your workforce and helps you kind of progress through the steps on that roadmap. So it's just an interesting kind of departure for this company. On the one hand, obviously, like a lot of vendors, they've been very dedicated to their partners and partner success. But they've done that chiefly through the services that they offer. And now they're kind of taking what they've learned working with MSPs and turned it into essentially a new part of the business.
There's a lot here to go over. It's very, very interesting. I don't even know where to start, Rich. Where do we break this down? So I'm sure this is a vendor that does services, but now they're kind of like also an ASCII. Right? Is that, or a CompTIA? Is that, am I making that connection right?
I mean, I don't know that I would liken them. I mean, they're like an IT Nation Evolve. Well, I don't know. You know what? You make a good point, actually, because they don't limit the community aspect of this to the peer group. So yeah, there is an element of community to this too. That makes them somewhat similar to an ASCII.
The comparison that I did, and I see a little bit, is the thing that comes to mind. It seems like a modified version of the 20 out of Dallas, because they want to be involved in teaching you how to do stuff, but they're not asking for ownership. And then it also, and it's got some elements of right now, the name is escaping me, but there is a company out of Texas they've got sort of a franchise model. God, it will come to me before we get out of this, but it seems as if it's all part of that they're trying to do. They would like to get into your business, but not take ownership of your business, but sell you products that will help you enhance your business.
Right.
Right. The 20 comparison is interesting because later on in this, I caught a note that they're going to be offering kind of their own RMM that partners can use and utilize, like a shared RMM platform. Am I catching that right, Rich?
Let me look that up. I don't know that they are developing. Trying to remember. I don't believe
it says that they can utilize their like ITB Designs RMM rather than one of their own. That is kind of a shared resource model, no?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I was just kind of they haven't written their own RMM, but yeah, and a shared RMM platform, absolutely.
A best practice. So I think what we're seeing a little bit more of this now, and they're all kind of snaking around and doing it in different ways and packaging it in an education model. But it definitely seems like as MSPs move forward, they are going to have to be involved with one of these kind of larger groups in order to look like a bigger MSP, similar to like the 20 or those. But maybe this is not quite like the 20 in the sense that the 20 wants to look like one giant MSP that everyone goes to, even though it's a lot of independent parts. Mm-hmm. This is more educational, but it's like, it seems like it's going to go that direction. What do you think, Randolph?
It sounds like it. To me, it sounds like another one of these things, and I'm not saying this in any kind of disparaging way, but that's all right. But it sounds like another one of these things where we started an MSP, it grew to a certain size, and now we want to help you do yours. What's been successful for us? We want to help you. We want to help you grow yours, and I think I have heard that one probably a lot of times in the last few years from just everybody that gets up there who wants to sell an MSP something. The sort of the badge of honor is to show you that tattoo that said, "I used to run an MSP." And now, I sold it, and I want to help you do yours. And so it's, I see this more of as a line extension for a lot of these guys, And it's not that they, and again, I'm not saying that they have bad ideas that they can't help you. I'm just saying it sort of falls into that franchise thing. Not, I mean, that the same idea sort of thing where they're trying to help you grow yours, because to them, it is easier for them to create one product and sell it to multiple people than it is to literally go chasing, go chasing clients. Because we as MSPs, we're built in and we all want to grow our business. And so if someone comes along and offers you something that you think will help you grow yours, we'll jump on it.
So Rich, how much of this is an education component do you think, and you said it's not limited to their current customers, that anybody can join this. So like, is there costs to join this if you wanted to utilize their training resources and their educational things or access their peer groups? Did they touch on that at all?
So one of the things I'm a little fuzzy on is which pieces of this do or do not have a cost. So I mentioned that, there is an application, a software product that they've announced and is coming out later this year. I mean, that is something that you will purchase and pay for. There was the consulting engagement, the MSP Compass consulting engagement, where they can kind of come in and help you create a roadmap for optimizing your infrastructure and process and so on. I assume is a paid engagement. I don't know, how much it costs. The Build It University piece of that is the part where I don't know for sure. I guarantee you, if you're participating in peer groups, there's some cost associated with that. I don't know if there's a cost for accessing, everything and anything else associated with that.
Cool. All right, we'll put a link to this story, and for those who are interested and want to dive in a little bit more to what they're offering there with the Build It University, you can go and you can check that out. And of course, if there's any other developments or anything that happens there, we'll obviously be back on talking about it again. But I want to move on to the next story, which is about MSP 360. And we're seeing this with a lot of vendors. So, they start with one really good tool that takes off, and then they kind of work into becoming a full suite. And that's what MSP 360 is kind of making headway on. And I believe you got a chance to talk to their CEO about it. So tell us about that, Rich.
I did. And, in my mind, this is sort of like a bookend story to one that I believe we talked about on the last episode. And we skipped a week, by the way, folks. It was a online conference week for us. We're back after a couple of weeks. But I believe on that last episode, we were talking about Ninja RMM, which is a company that has RMM in the name. They were 100% focused on RMM. They introduced a data protection product and made clear that there are more products coming. They're really going to be looking to build a suite of products for MSPs in the way that, ConnectWise and Kaseya and Datto and SolarWinds all have these integrated suites. They are embarking on that journey as well. And same story for MSP 360. Now, interestingly enough, MSP 360 used to be CloudBerry Lab, and the product that they were best known for was a data protection product, a backup product. They're sort of moving in the opposite direction of Ninja RMM. The product that they have now introduced is their managed remote desktop solution for MSPs, so a remote access tool. But similar kind of story. This is their first, and actually it's arguably their second step. The first step was changing the name from CloudBerry Lab to MSP 360. The name sort of screams sweet, doesn't it? That they will be looking to provide 360 degrees, everything that an MSP needs to be effective. They adopted that new name a yearish ago, if I'm not mistaken, and have been sort of embarked on that process of broadening out the product set since then. This is a particularly important milestone in that process. But in my interview with Brian Helwig, the CEO of the company, he made clear that it sounded like they're getting close to a point where the developments are going to be happening faster, that in the next 6 months, you're going to see a series of new products come out, and it will be much clearer what the suite that they're aiming to deliver is going to look like. In previous interviews with these guys, I've kind of asked, what do you have in mind in terms of a suite? Will there be an RMM, a PSA? And they still don't really like to talk about that. They're waiting for these products to become available before they provide specific input on what it is they have coming. But over the next 6 months, approximately, there are more products coming, and you know, the landscape of suite providers for MSPs will be a little bit wider.
We're seeing this transition a lot with various vendors. Randolph, as you devise and advise solutions for your clients, do you try to put them into giant suites like this? You know, what do you think?
You know, we try to put them into stuff. Fundamental thing is this: we're in business to make money. Okay, so we look at some of these suites and see if we want to put the client in them. Sometimes it takes a lot for us to switch from one to the other, and just a rough guesstimate on anything that you switch to, you know, you put into it the time that it takes to learn the product. And, you know, let's just say for a rough thing, if you've got somebody who you can just, an easy number here, who you can bill at $100 an hour, and it takes them, you know, and it takes them 100 hours to learn something, you know, you've got several $1,000s invested in the product. So how much better, you know, based on your rate of, you know, your ROI, you know, how long will it take for you to get that back? And that's just a simple changing from one product to another and learning how to do it. And if you've got multiple people involved, so whenever these products come along, you've got to take a real hard look at them and see what am I gaining from switching. But you know, we always look at products, you know, look at different things. But I think a lot of times the tendency is to say, what can I add versus what can I replace? And because, you know, additional, hopefully you're adding something, but to switch from, you know, regardless of whatever your RMM is, you know, I'm not picking, say if you're using Datto and you want to go to ConnectWise, you know, what's the ROI on switching, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the way we look at just about everything that we've got in here. And we get a lot of calls, you know, from every vendor wanting you to sell something. And you just got to look at it and say, you know, like, fellas, I can't do it right now. And with this pandemic in here, we're having a harder time looking to switch stuff, because it's while we may have done quite well in the first part of the year, you know, remoting, getting every people up and running, the question becomes, you know, what's the other part going to be? You know, the clients are still in business, but as their clients go the way of the wind, you know, eventually it's going to roll over into your side. So we're just paranoid. But I digressed.
No, and I mean that what you just pointed to is the challenge that MSP 360, Ninja RMM, you know, that's what they're going to run into is that there are these much bigger, very well established incumbents in the marketplace right now, and it's a big deal to change RMM or PSA platforms and so on. So I mean, what is the motivator that will get people to do it? And I mean, when you talk to MSP 360, at least, one of the things that that they will highlight is the affordability of their products. And I think they see this as their competitive tool, basically, that if you're new to managed services and you're looking for something affordable that you can get started with, they can compete for that business. If you're in the managed services market and you just feel like you're spending too much money on your tool set right now and you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more cost effective, you know, they may be looking to grab some share that way too.
What I also see, though, and you know, when you're talking about those tools, I see a change coming about in terms of the tools. You know, you've got some of those guys, and I'm not endorsing or speak or anything about their products, but just their pricing model. You know, you've got the Synchros, the Terras, who are offering you a pay for the technician rather than for the device. And if, you know, at some point in there, you look at it and you say, whoa, you know, if somebody's only got 5 technicians, you know, 5 technicians and they're managing multiple devices, and you do the math on it, sometimes that you could look at it and that can actually come out to be a better ROI than it is going with some of these products where they charge you per device. So I think these guys are going to shake up the industry a little bit, at least from the point of pricing, and it might just put some depression on some of the other products in terms of them doing price increases.
Yeah, two thoughts, Rich, that I want to ask. So one is, everyone's trying to devise and develop and consolidate into these big suites of tools. And you said there's a lot of incumbents, but there's also a lot of consolidation in the MSP market as well. A lot of MSPs consolidating together and trying to be larger, more regional, or even national MSPs. Seems like the more that happens, the less room there is for all of these different suites.
Well, I guess it depends on whether there's room for the newer, smaller suites, you know, or if, and I don't know, it's an interesting thing. The whole MSP consolidation trend is a really interesting one because it is an enormously important story in the industry right now, and something that every smaller MSP has to be kind of thinking about. But I don't think anyone believes that the smaller MSP is going to, you know, go the way of the dodo. Like that's you're not going to exist anymore. So I think at least for a while, you're still going to see newcomers entering the market. There's still a lot of our readers even who are barely doing any managed services or aren't doing any managed services. You're going to see a lot of these newcomers from the market come in. There will be a space in the market as a result for products that are sort of scaled to their requirements and budgets and so on. And then as you see more and more of these bigger and bigger MSPs, I think that there will be an advantage in the marketplace to that small set of bigger companies out there, you know, with the established brands and the scale and the resources and so on to support a company with a regional or a national footprint.
All right, my second question, and this is to both of you. Business name, company name, which is better, CloudBerry Labs or MSP 360? Randolph, which one is better?
Both of them, neither one of them really throws up any images in my mind. I would go with the MSP 360 because I'm in the industry. I mean, because we're in the industry. CloudBerry Labs, you know.
See, I like CloudBerry. Rich, what do you like?
You know, I'm sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in idle moments, I wonder sometimes, what does a CloudBerry look like? What does a CloudBerry taste like? What is it?
Where's the CloudBerry tree? You know, can I start a CloudBerry farm?
We need more.
You know,
and that's what they should have called it. They should have called it CloudBerry Farms.
You know, is CloudBerry Labs located right next to Underwriters Labs?
I like
the berries are poisonous. Yeah.
You can make CloudBerry pie. See, there was all of these marketing ways they could have gone.
Yes.
And then what do? They end up copying like the Xbox 360 name and just throw an MSP in front of it.
I wonder how many people thought MSP 360 was affiliated with Microsoft.
See, that's what it is. Don't get me started on that. Rich knows I could go on for hours complaining about like, you know, companies that use like, they get so uncreative in names, like, oh, 360 everything, you know. Oh, I tell you.
Yeah.
But I see, I'm more of the CloudBerry camp. I think there was a lot more interesting marketing things you could have done with that. And fun business names. But all right, Rich, I want to point out one other thing in the story because it seems like everybody's got their own universities now. Looks like back in February, we talked about a partner enablement resource they were doing, which is now out, MSP University. Is this an accredited school, Rich?
I do not believe so, no. But yeah, you're right. This is, and you know, you look at the big names we were talking about before, they all have training and enablement resources. And so MSP 360 knows, you know, to be a serious player in that market, they need to have that too. And this MSP University is their platform, their resource for that. The interesting thing about it that's worth kind of pointing out is that, I mean, at least for the time being, and there are no plans I'm aware of to change this, you don't have to be an MSP 360 partner to utilize these resources. And I believe they're all free. So, you know, they're obviously using it as a brand awareness, a marketing tool, if you will. Here's a big pile of stuff that can maybe help you be more successful in your business. So it's not just a benefit of partnering with them. It's something that's available to anybody, and I'm sure they're hoping that will attract more partners.
Nothing like big piles of stuff, right, Randolph?
That's it. Big piles of stuff. We need more stuff,
especially when it's free.
Yes.
Free stuff. Yeah.
Free is good.
It's funny. You could drive around most neighborhoods on garage sale day and find all kinds of big piles of free stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually not worth a whole lot, but maybe theirs is. And if it is, you know, utilize free resources to grow your business. Yes. So I think with that, Rich, I think we're through the news, right?
Yep.
All right. So why don't we take a break? When we come back, we've got an interview that we did a little while ago with Dan Schiappa and Chester Wisniewski from Sophos. Really great interview. Unfortunately, we did it before Randolph was able to join us, so he's not on us with this interview, but we are going to go ahead and watch that now. It's really good. Lots of great stuff. So stick around for that, and we will be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. We're very excited for our next guests, and I say guests as plural, to join us. As Chief Product Officer, Dan Schiappa is responsible for a smorgasbord of things at Sophos, like overall strategy, product management, architecture, R&D, and more. Also here with us is Chester Wisniewski, Sophos's principal research scientist. They're here to discuss some of their recent ransomware research, among other things. So please join me in welcoming Dan Schiappa and Chester Wisniewski to the show. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Now, Dan, I'd say welcome back for you, because this will be your second time that you've joined us.
Yes.
So welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. I guess I must have done well the first time.
or you at least you had a good enough time that you wanted to come back for more.
I love coming back. This is great.
So it's really great to have you here. Now, please take a couple minutes just for any new listeners or watchers to learn a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Product Officer at Sophos. I've been there for almost 7 years now. I've been in cyber since 2002. Was head of Windows security at Microsoft, was at RSA. So I've been kicking around this crazy industry for a long time. And I think, as you'll hear today, the thing that makes this industry so unique is it's never the same problem twice. As soon as you fix something else pops up, and it's just keeps you on your toes, and it's a pretty exciting industry to be in.
Absolutely. Very, very exciting industry, and a very scary industry at the same time. We're talking about ransomware and security and all that stuff. And the man who does a lot of research into that part of it is Chester Wisniewski. This is your first time on, so welcome. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always fun to do these. My job at Sophos is actually really cool if you're a tech guy, and that I get to work with all of the researchers around the world and kind of figure out all the detail and interesting things about what they're doing and paint the bigger picture, both for the product teams at Sophos and people within Sophos to have a better perspective on kind of that whole threat landscape, but also to communicate that to our channel partners and our customers so that they can build more effective strategies at defending their networks and their data. So it's kind of fun for me because I get to do a bit of my own research, but I also just get to talk to all the people that have gone like way down the rabbit hole on all these different topics, gather all that together and use it to get some perspective.
So my first question is going to be for you, Chester, because as you say, you do a lot of research with other researchers, so you see the big giant threat landscape that's out there. How do you go to sleep at night?
Well, I guess I'm fortunate in that I don't actually have to defend those networks. I'm not the CISO for the company, so I'm not responsible for even defending our own network for that matter. So that makes it a little bit easier. But the truth of the matter is, obviously the range of threats and sophistication of threats has continued to increase. But I actually think we're making progress on this as well. I don't think this is all for naught. Like it feels like it. We don't see enough people behind these things going to jail to make us feel good that law enforcement has a grip on dealing with this. And certainly having our credit cards replaced 4 times a year is not giving us a lot of confidence about people's ability to protect our personal information. But on the other hand, if you look at it in that longer perspective, I've been at Sophos since 2003, so I've been kind of working on this for 17 years just within Sophos. And in that time period, the reason these attacks have had to move on and become this complicated, and don't get me wrong, that complication in attacks isn't just bad for the defender, it's actually bad for the attackers too, right? Like the more moving parts there are, the more that can go wrong, just like in any other system. And so the more we make them increase that complexity, that's showing that we're making their job harder. And that's really what this industry is about, raising the cost of stealing information, raising the cost of operating a criminal operation in order to do this kind of data theft and ransomware and all these types of things. So what lets me sleep at night, I guess, is that I feel like we're actually not only doing the, on the right side, doing the right work, but we're actually succeeding in making it more difficult for the criminals, which means we have half a chance at winning this war, even if we lose some of the battles along the way.
So, the main thing we wanted to talk about with you on the show, and why we're excited to have you on the show, actually kind of ties into that. So, I mean, about a month ago, you folks at Sophos published a series of blogs that you called the Realities of Ransomware series, where you sort of updated people on some fairly dramatic changes in the ransomware landscape over the course of the last 10, 11 months or so. And a lot of them feel like they stem from what you were just kind of talking about there, which is that the generic kind of ransomware attacks that were successful before aren't working as well because, you know, the good guys are doing better. But there are a number of, you know, the bad guys are adapting to that. And one of the things that you folks talked about is that the size of the ransom that they're going after is increasing. So, I mean, talk a little bit about that change that you're seeing out there right now.
Yeah, I would call it a bit of a stratification. In fact, so since the blog post you're talking about, we've posted another one on another group called Dharma, which is a ransomware as a service group, which kind of an ongoing series, if you will, where as we're learning things, we're trying to share that with the community. And each one of these different things are kind of specializing, if you will. So the people that have the skills are now going for multi-million-dollar ransoms daily. And in fact, we had a few in the recent times that were over $10 million. That were demanded from a single victim. So, if you've got the skills to kind of go in and do that hand-to-hand combat, and you know how to move laterally and stay stealthy and identify the valuable assets of a company that you're ransoming, there's very large ransoms involved in that now, and they're not messing around for, $500 a PC or $700 a PC like we saw a few years ago. But not every criminal has that skill set either. And Dharma is a great example of that. Dharma seems to cater to the less sophisticated criminal who's happy to take $5,000 to $10,000 from every victim and hit smaller victims that may not have multi-million-dollar resources, but also don't probably have as sophisticated of a defense. They're easier to breach, more vulnerabilities, more password reuse, whatever it is that allows the attacker to get in. And, they're sort of packaging that up in a kit that makes it so that pretty much as dumb a criminal as wants can get involved, because there's literally a menu in this malware that tells you, like, press 1 to steal passwords, press 2 to launch the ransomware, this kind of thing. So there's a whole spectrum, right? And different groups fall within different parts of that spectrum, which often affects what type of victims they target, what type of ransoms they might expect to yield from those victims, and what technical skills are necessary in order to participate at that level. So, but that, that's all very different than a few years ago. And I think that's one of the things we're really hoping the people listening and watching to this video gain from this, which is you kind of need to understand where it's at right now, because what you think is probably last year's information. And if it's not relevant to what's happening right now, you might have a blind spot and you could be caught off guard.
One of those trends that you talked about in some of those blog posts had to do with what I think the phrase you folks used was live engagement. I mean, there are human adversaries basically working their way into networks, moving around laterally, as you were saying. So, I mean, why is that happening? You've kind of hinted at why that's happening. Why do you think that's happening? And what are the implications for the victims or would-be victims of ransomware?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is what you just described is the use of what we would typically call nation state tactics to apply now to commercial ransomware. And so this kind of ransomware as a service, or the productization of it, they're trying to get it broadly distributed, has been replaced by these adversaries with very hands-on traditional kind of nation state tactics. So they can go after not just broad impact to an organization, but get after the data that matters, get after the thing that's going to be highly valuable to the target, and take their time. They'll go out and destroy backups. They'll go ahead and clandestinely scope out the network and the environments, go after the data that's important, get it, and then have much higher ransoms on a per attack basis than they have used before. But even with all of these really kind of hands-on and more complicated level of attacks, we're still seeing large numbers of them come from these groups. So they're still able to produce this at a pretty decent volume, but they're going after much more impactful, much higher return types of ransom attacks.
Well, it's probably worth putting volume into perspective, Dan. Like, I mean, a large number of organizations and maybe a small number of computers because of the human element, right? And they're just targeting those incredibly high value computers instead of just you know, we used to use the term spray and pray, right? You just get in there and just spray the malware all over the network and pray that you hit something important so that you could get some money out of somebody, right? And they're not doing that. They're, you know, that targeting that Dan's talking about is allowing them to hit a smaller number of assets and still cause a disproportionate amount of pain. And pain usually translates into cash when we're talking about ransoms.
You know, I wonder, the security landscape is a lot different this year now than it was 2 years ago. And I think there's been a lot of improvements in like ransomware protection, and that's kind of built into all of these different suites that are being deployed. Is that also contributing to a little bit more targeted approaches with higher value targets? Is because it's maybe there's a lot less easily vulnerable PCs out there?
Well, it's certainly shifted from PC to server as well, because you know, it's one of the things that we've noticed as a leading into the last, I think you've nailed it, about 2 years, maybe 18 months, when we saw everything kind of really shifting toward this more extortion combined with ransom, you know, more targeted stuff, was we got really good at defending our endpoints. We got rid of Java, we got rid of Flash, we started applying Patch Tuesday updates in a week instead of in 4 months. And that made the endpoints really hard to attack. And then everybody went and rolled out next generation endpoint security because endpoints is where all their threats were coming in. So they, you know, really doubled down on protecting the endpoints. Meanwhile, the servers are back sitting in the DMZ and they're running Windows Defender and they've got nothing else on them. And they don't have any of these sophisticated tools because they're the servers, you know, we don't worry about that. It's the dumb users that are the problem. They're the ones that are causing all the trouble. And the criminals went, those are the least defended assets now. All the valuable information's on the least well-defended thing that's facing the internet. And so they started going after it, right? And the other part, I guess, back to your last question as well, that Dan alluded to in that hand-to-hand combat, if you will, where there's a, you know, human adversary there. Most of these mid-sized organizations aren't prepared for that. Their defenses were built for an automated threat. You know, there was WannaCry and it was automated and it spread around. There was Conficker and it was automated and it spread around. We built our defenses around this idea that we were fighting against code. Code was the enemy, and we could write defenses to see what that code does and defend us against code. You can't write code to defend against a human very well. Humans are way too unpredictable. And so these organizations that depended on that automated defense are caught a bit with their pants down when it turns out there's a human at the keyboard at the other side. They're just not ready for it. And large enterprises, defense, that kind of stuff, they've always had human adversaries. They, you know, and we don't see, and you'll notice, we don't see their names in the headlines for ransom attacks either. You know, the organizations that traditionally were well prepared, our financial bank, our banking system, our defense systems, we're not hearing about much of this stuff. Whereas fields where they don't normally have a human adversary, they're caught off guard.
Now, one of the trends you identified in the blog series, and I'm curious to know if this is really part of the ransomware phenomenon or maybe an offshoot of it, but you're seeing, you know, these same people who are looking around for the really high value data are stealing some of it, exfiltrating some of it, and threatening to expose it to the world. You know, so we tend to think of ransomware as being about encrypted data, but it sounds like there's maybe a trend where it's stolen data that you have to pay a ransom to get back as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like having 2 bites at the apple. So they'll go ahead and ransom the data and then also threaten to release the data to the public if you don't pay the ransom. So it's really kind of a double threat. And what that means is, you know, even if you do have some way of recovering from backups or the like, your data has been exfiltrated, and the public release of that data could provide God knows what. It just, you know, worst case, an embarrassment to the brand and impact on your customers. Could be, you know, bring on different compliance regulation of effects, things of that nature. But yeah, it's double bite at the apple, and they know that's a much more effective way to drive much higher ransoms by having kind of that dual threat.
Now, you guys, you see a lot of ransomware attacks, and one of the blog posts I particularly enjoyed was about what you call the 5 warning signs that you are about to be the victim of ransomware, that there are some indicators, if you know what you're looking for, that somebody is coming after you soon. So what are those 5 indicators that, you know, maybe folks in our audience here could kind of keep an eye out for?
I think the number one thing that rings important to me in those 5 is looking for the abnormal use of normal things. You know, understanding what that baseline is and looking for those anomalies. And examples of that are just administrative tools being abused by the attackers or their use on systems where they don't belong. So one of the things you'll frequently see is when an attacker gains a foothold, they want to scan the network and find all the assets. They want to know, where are the database servers? Where are all the file servers? Where's all the data that I'm going to lock up, right? They'll run those scans from the server that they initially compromised in that DMZ I talked about earlier. Well, that's not a normal behavior. It's not an abnormal behavior for you to see network scans. Your own IT team probably does them just to identify what assets are on the network. But when that scan occurs from the DMZ in a server instead of coming from a laptop of the IT team, that's an anomaly, right? That's something that shouldn't be happening. It's an early indicator something is wrong. And criminals are making more and more use of what we call gray hat tools. In fact, we've published a couple reports. One of our lab researchers, Tad, has published a few reports in the last 12 months showing which tools are popular amongst criminals to abuse in one of these ransom attacks. So if you see these activity from these tools, these are early indicators that something is, they probably haven't stolen your data yet. They probably haven't gotten ready and placed the ransomware and hit the detonate button, but they're in the network getting ready to do that. And so there's this window of opportunity where you may not have been able to prevent them, but they haven't succeeded in their goal yet. And if you can stop them in that middle space, then you're still okay, right? And a lot of that is the abuse of those tools and at abnormal hours. Certainly some of these groups seem to study what is the normal shift for the security team and when is the late shift that it's like the junior people just keeping an eye on the fort while everybody's out of town. And in fact, we saw that with the over the Labor Day holiday, the Hartford Public Schools were hit with ransomware. It sounds like the attacks sort of started on Thursday, but they didn't really hit the button to detonate till Saturday in the middle of a holiday weekend, when it's least likely you've got the most talented people at their best ready to sit there and react and respond, kind of catch them off guard, if you will. And so looking for those early tripwire signals is part of that learning to deal with a human adversary. And that's what the goal of those 5 points are. These are, things that we see in nearly every single attack were the initial indicator where they had a chance to see this was coming. But if they didn't react to it, unfortunately, ransom was probably going to be the result.
Yeah, and as Chet mentioned, the key thing here is you're dealing with a human adversary. So it's not malware that's triggering any of these 5 events. It's humans living, what we would call living off the land, using what's available to them from the company's IT infrastructure to be able to do the reconnaissance, and in some cases levy part of the attack. And that makes it much more difficult to defend against.
Yeah, more often than not, these are Microsoft tools that we all use every day. It's PowerShell, PS Exec, PS Kill, Windows Management Instrument, WMI, the Windows Management Instrumentation stuff to deploy the malware. They're using all the same things. If the IT team has a tool to deploy software, well, it also deploys malware if you're the administrator. And that's often what they're doing.
Now, Dan, you were saying that, even these human adversary kind of attacks, you're seeing those in reasonably high volumes, but it is a more labor intensive process than that sort of spray and pray kind of approach, automated, approach to things. So our readers, our listeners mostly serve the SMB market. Should they be less worried about these really targeted kinds of intrusions and more focused on the sort of broader based attacks, or are you seeing, human adversaries across the board, enterprise all the way down?
I'd say all of the above. They need to worry about both. As much as we're talking now about these human adversarial attacks, you still need to have the proper defenses for the more programmatic attacks, because they're still out there and there's still plenty of them. But SMBs definitely have to worry about these human adversary attacks for a variety of reasons. One is they could still have valuable data valuable to their business. And of course, the ransom's all relative to the type of business and what they're capable of paying. But even though these are very hands-on, these are pretty replicable. There's kind of a recipe and a pattern that they can follow. And in most cases, as Chet mentioned, it's Microsoft tools, and nearly everybody has these Microsoft tools available to them. So they can pop into SMBs, mid-markets, enterprise alike, and use kind of the same recipe. And then they deviate when the recipe needs to be changed because of some type of defense mechanism, or they triggered something that makes them change an approach. The other thing with SMBs is with most companies is, as COVID hit and we all rushed to work from home, IT organizations didn't have the normal time to plan for something like this as they normally would. And so there was a lot of gaps in the protections in this environment. So what we're seeing as well is industry-wide as a lot of attacks against remote infrastructure and against companies working remotely, because it's just a new kind of IT ecosystem for a lot of companies, and there's just gaps in their defenses, and the attackers are taking advantage of that.
Well, and it's not hard to make up for $1 million ransom with $110,000 ransoms, and that's exactly what the Dharma group is doing. You know, Dharma is ransomware as a service, but the people that are operating it are doing an incredibly large number of small business attacks at $5,000 to $20,000 each. So those are numbers that small businesses can afford without going bankrupt typically. It's probably the size of their payroll that's sitting in the bank account on the second Friday of the month. And it's a massive impact on those small businesses, but they're easier pickings by large numbers. There's tens of thousands of those small businesses to go after, and they often don't have as sophisticated defenses. So it's sort of, you know, there's a slider between automated and targeted, and you can set it closer to the automated end when you're going at the small and mid-sized businesses, where most of the attack can be automated so that you can get the volume of victims that you need to still make a lot of money. And there's only a smaller human element to make sure that you set the price appropriately, and you know, these kinds of things. And that's in particular with Dharma, that's exactly what we're seeing there. And so it may not have the entire sophistication of NetWalker, which we wrote about in August, where you know they're doing crazy stuff of manipulating Windows caches and stuff at really deep levels to bypass anti-ransomware tools. But it's enough to bypass the defenses of the vast majority of small businesses out there, and they'll just make it up in numbers.
Dan, you were referring before to the whole work from home phenomenon that everybody's dealing with right now. So, I mean, in light of the threats we've been talking about here, and just beyond those threats, other threats, do you folks at Sophos have a sort of recommended security stack for a work from home workforce?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly do. We've got technology in the Sophos portfolio that's designed specifically to help with that. We have our Sophos Connect VPN client, which is an encrypted channel, obviously, for virtual private networks. We also have our remote Ethernet device appliances that we can send out to certain, you would send out to certain customers, perhaps IT administrators working remotely, that would use hardware to do that kind of secure connection. So there's a bunch of different ways we would protect that. And it's really key that you leverage this technology as best you can. There's obviously a big push around zero trust networking, which is another way to solve the same problem without the use of VPNs. That takes a little more planning, because on the back end, you have to basically tie the access control capabilities to the users, to those assets in the back end. So it's a little more planful to do that. But I think we're seeing a big kind of push to adopt technologies like that. I think the critical thing is companies moved really fast. And if you did have to move really fast to get that enabled, we're going to be in this mode probably in some ways forever. I think a lot of people are gonna be like, hey, this working from home thing's pretty nice. Maybe I'll work from home 2 days a week instead of, in the office 5 days a week. And you'll start to see some changes in how we work. Go back and make sure you spend the time to really now analyze what you've done, make sure you have the right tools. Come to companies like Sophos that have a broad portfolio of technologies ranging from the endpoint to the network side and everywhere in between to help you enable that scenario properly with the right level of security.
And sometimes it's simple things that make the biggest impact. Hearing from some of our clients and partners in some roundtable events I was doing, the number one thing that helped them out was simply having our central cloud management to have visibility into those assets when they left the office. It was like, the old on-premise stuff, as soon as somebody left the office, you lost the visibility. You had no ability to see what was happening or be able to manage it and control it. And having your web filtering and your antivirus and all your stuff remotely manageable and full visibility just because it's all talking to the cloud meant that you didn't skip a beat, which really is helpful too.
It's an interesting time for the hacking world, and it seems like, as you were saying, Dan, with so much of the workforce probably going to stay working remotely, I think for the hackers it's going to be a lot easier to catch people with their pants down, because a lot of people that work from home aren't wearing pants anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole different issue to deal with, but yeah, I mean, I think this is why in a world where you had to do it quickly, that great, enable your business for business continuity, but now take a deep breath and go back and be very planful about it, because using technologies like zero trust networking is a great way to reduce your security footprint, to open up the ability for your employees to conduct business in a very flexible, very efficient way. But instead of, for example, having a VPN where once I'm in, I basically have access to everything, with Zero Trust, I can really give granular access to what is just needed. And I can even put, pretty dynamic access rules on that as well. And but that takes some time. So go ahead and make that planning aside, make sure you do that, because I do think we're going to be in this world for quite some time, if not forever. So let's do it right and make sure that you're looking at the full landscape of what you're doing and how to secure it properly.
And wear pants.
And wear pants. Who knows? Maybe I'm not wearing pants. I don't know. But hey,
business on top,
to each
party
their
on the bottom.
Right? I'm not going to judge.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. But I really want to thank Chester and Dan from Sophos here for joining us. Dan, please let people know, where can they learn more about Sophos? Where can they reach out to you if they have more questions?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to reach out to us is through the website, sophos.com. There's a variety of different sources there. In addition to what you can learn about our products, we have different elements of the site where you can go and get access to this great threat research that we're publishing on a regular basis. There's places for to go trial the products. There's places for you to reach out to executives like myself and people like Chet, who are really kind of in the trenches with this. And so it's a huge source of not just kind of product stuff, but also tremendous threat research and threat intel that you can access there as well.
Excellent stuff. And Chester, I'm very, very excited to have you on. I always wonder, like, what my life would be like if I knew as much about the threats that were out there as you do. Like, I think I would end up living in a Faraday cage somewhere in a cave if I knew what you know. So the fact that you're just in a house and not like in a bunker is amazing to me.
All my data is in a safe deposit box on an encrypted hard drive, if that helps.
Yeah, that's a virtual background. He is in a bunker.
That's awesome. Well, Chester, if people want to learn more about you, and how can they reach out to you if they have questions or want to engage you with Sophos?
Well, as Dan says, people come to news.sophos.com. That's where we publish all of our uncut research, and I contribute to things there. And of course, if you want to interact with me directly, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Wisneski.
Excellent stuff. Well, thank you both so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Schiappa, the Chief Product Officer at Sophos, and Chester Wisniewski. I knew I was going to mess it up at some point during the show, and there it was. The Principal Research Scientist at Sophos. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll hope to have you back on again in the near future. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to wrap up the show with some regular end of the show types of features, including Rich pulling out a crystal ball and wearing one of those crazy hats and trying to predict the future. It's really, really funny. So you'll want to stick around for that. We will be right back. All right, and we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, Randolph, you can get a chance to see this interview, so I know you won't be able to comment it yet until we put the show out. But Rich, I thought it was a great interview with lots of really interesting insight, a lot of actionable things, which I love to hear, especially about security. I mean, everybody's paranoid about ransomware, and just when they were talking about the different things that you should look for in your network, like anomalies that you may not normally think about, I thought like that will help every MSP who's dealing with security right now. What did you think?
Yeah, you in that interview, you got to the thing that is always striking to me. And I've probably said this on the podcast before. There are a lot of people who enjoy being scared and go to horror movies as a result. I do interviews with security analysts because there's just a ton of scary stuff happening out there. And both those guys, and Chester in particular, kind of live in that world. And yeah, you were kind of getting at the fact, how well do you sleep? Are you 6 feet under in a bunker right now? Because man alive, the stuff they're aware of that we are blissfully ignorant of, I think, there's a lot of it.
It's like we need to all know more about it and understand the dangers that are out there. But the more you learn about it, the less you want to go on living.
Right.
So lots of scary stuff out there, Randolph. I'm sure you're dealing with security things, and security related breaches and attacks all the time. I mean, what's your, if in 5 seconds, 5, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever you need, what is your take on the threat landscape, and what kind of measures are you taking to protect your customers?
The threat landscape is broadened because people are not taking their devices home. Because we were locking down stuff in the office and we didn't worry about it. But if you've got a company that's got 10 employees in 10 different locations, all of a sudden your threat landscape just changes. How much do you risk? How much do you lock down those boxes? And particularly if they have to connect into the office. So we just see more and more threats, and the question is, how do we get compensated for that? Because a lot of our clients are saying to us, we've got our income is dropping, and and your cost, and you want to raise your cost to us. How do we make this work?
I wonder if your typical SMB really feels stuck between a rock and a hard place, Rich. Is sitting here thinking about it, like you either got to give a ton of money to some nefarious hacker without pants on somewhere who's trying to, steal all your money, or you got to give it to an MSP to try to protect you from the other guy who's trying to steal your money, but they're both trying to take your money. So what is an MSP, or what is an SMB to do?
Yeah, well, I guess that is the cybersecurity tax on businesses of every size, basically, and you're going to pay it to somebody, but there's no free ride anymore, basically.
Yeah, and we've just got to figure out how to get them to think that it's a necessity. As an analogy that I use here is to think about the tax that we pay that our parents didn't pay. Let me give you an example of what I mean. A cell phone is a necessary item for you. It wasn't for your parents. So that's a $200 minimum, $200 a month tax, okay? Cable TV is a necessity for you, but it wasn't for your parents. That's another $100 a month tax. So, right away, it's $3,600 more for you to be at the same state in life with necessities that your parents were. And would you give up your phone? You may give up your cable, but you won't give up your internet. So now we think about those things that have suddenly creeped in. Now, for some of us, though, giving up the automobile was a tax our parents paid that we didn't pay. Because you live in downtown Seattle, you may or may not need a car. So, there's just little things that we pay, that little adjustments that we make going forward, that it becomes part of our lives. And so when we talk to these business owners and we talk to them about things that just happened, that, they're just little taxes on doing things or changing things that we have to do. But what do you substitute for it? What do we get for having a cell phone?
Sure. Well, and it's funny you brought up the cable analogy, because a lot of people have cut cable. It's kind of more of a common thing now. I got rid of cable 10 years ago. It was like the best thing I ever did. But if you see it, a lot of people have slowly replaced it with other things. Yeah, I got rid of cable, but now I subscribe to Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and HBO Go. And it's like, oh well, you're still spending $80 a month. You're just not giving it to a cable company. So,
and not to mention, I increased my bandwidth.
Right. Yeah. True that.
Yeah. So it's it's a substitution form of things that we do. Yeah.
It is, and it's an interesting time for everybody who deals with security and how that's changing. But what else is interesting, Randolph? And I'm going to tell you, 5 questions with you is going to be interesting, because I know we are going to have a lot of fun. I have some very interesting questions to ask you. So for those who may be tuning in for the first time or are watching for the first time, we play a little segment here on ChannelPro Weekly that we call 5 Questions. It's become quite the popular segment amongst not only our listeners and viewers, but also our guests. Where basically Rich and I come up with 5 questions off the top of our head. We have no idea. We have nothing written down. I promise you, I swear, we think of them in real time. And we ask them to our guests and interviewees to learn a little bit about them and just see what pops in there. So it's gonna be fun. And Randolph, I can't wait to play this game with you. Rich, I will be the gentleman and give the first question to you.
Okay, thank you. So a fair warning, Randolph, I always just by default seem to go to sports and food, and I'm probably going to do both of them here. I'll start with sports. Cubs or White Sox?
White Sox.
No question about it.
No question. And I'll tell you exactly why. Okay. Yeah. I can get up on the spur of the moment and go and pretty much get a ticket for a White Sox game. The Cubs, they have a cult following. And I only say a cult following from the point of view that their tickets are hard to get. And so if you just, I don't have season tickets for either one, but if I decide I want to go to a baseball game, the White Sox is closer. It's closer, and you can pretty much get a ticket. And
It's a good reason. It's a good reason. All right, I will ask you another Chicago-themed question because Rich asked you one, and I know quite a bit
Okay.
about the area since I've lived here in this general area for a long time. When was the first time you had a Chicago-style hot dog, and what was your initial impression?
The first time I had a Chicago-style hot dog, God, let's see, I moved here 30 years ago, so it was about 30 years ago. Okay. And my impression of it is, oh, this is an acquired taste. And by that, I mean an acquired taste. I was used to eating those, I lived in New York, and you stop by and get the guy in the street who would whip this thing out of a cart, slap it on a piece of bun, put a bunch of crap on it, and you'd eat it, so that taste I had acquired. So now when I got here, I had to retrain my palate for what was the Chicago hot dog. And then I had to learn what in public, what you put on it. And if you were caught putting ketchup on it, they would take you to the city limits or take you out on the lake and have you walk the plank. So we had to learn a few things about what not to do to your hot dog in public. Yeah, but it was about 30 years ago.
And so now, do you prefer them Chicago style?
I have adjusted to them quite well, and there is a greasy spoon, or a Maxwell's, which is on the since you're in Chicago. It is about Roosevelt and the Dan Ryan Kennedy interchange in there where the name switches, and it's on the west side of the street, and it's open 24/7. I've gone through there some odd hours of the night just to get a hot dog, and I've taken my daughter along, and I digress a bit, but one of our interesting experiences was we were riding around the city about 1 o'clock one night, and she wanted a hot dog. She was a teenager. She wanted a hot dog, and we stopped in there, and it just happened to stop in on a night when there were a bunch of female bikers. And we sat there, we had our hot dog and talked with them for a half hour about riding bikes. It was one of those memorable experiences my daughter and I talk about to this day.
Oh, that's awesome. I've never been there. I'm going to have to check that place out. I'll get those details from you later. Rich, question number 3 to you.
Well, as long as we're talking Chicago food here, and in the hopes of maybe even setting off a fight between the two of you, Randolph, best Chicago pizza.
Let's see. That one I got. Okay, definition of best Chicago is determined by how hungry you are at the time you consume it.
Okay. I couldn't say it. That's so well said. Go ahead.
Being in front of Giordano's when you're hungry, it beats the hell out of going anyplace else. And so I have actually found that I enjoyed the Giordano's experience, going in and particularly with a group of people getting their pie. And I enjoy it. I enjoy that one. Yeah,
it's a hard question to ask, Rich, because there's also Chicago style pizza of like the names that people would probably have heard of throughout the country, and then there are a lot of small, just killer Chicago style pizza places that are more mom and pop style, and a lot of those actually, if you live in the city, like you'll go to a Giordano's, you'll go to a Lou Malnati's, and you'll enjoy it, but like you will have your favorite pizza place that is out of this world compared to those. But no fight here, actually, Randolph. I think if I had to choose a deep dish pizza, I would be with you. I think I would prefer Giordano's over the other ones.
But now I'll start the fight with you, okay?
I'm ready.
The best pizza I ever ate in my life was that little greasy spoon in New York City, which is nameless. And you walk up to some guy who operates a shop that's the width of a pizza oven, and you give him, at the time it was 15 cents, so I was a teenager. You give him 15 cents and he gives you a piece of pizza, a slice of pizza on a sheet of paper, and you have to fold it to eat it while walking down the street and not losing your book bag. That was the best slice of pizza ever.
I don't think I would fight with you. I don't think I agree with you. You have to, like you said, to really love Chicago style pizza, you have to be hungry, right? Because if you go in and you get a deep dish, I mean, that's one slice is like a meal in itself, and you're done. But I'm with you. I do like New York style pizza, and a little bit, sometimes the thinner ones as well. So you got to go with your taste. But I think if I had to choose, like my personal favorite, like if I was offered, you could only have one slice of pizza now for the rest of your life, I would choose Chicago style pizza. I think Rich wouldn't. He wouldn't choose pizza at all. He would he would choose. What would you choose, Rich?
I'd probably choose pizza. Actually, you'd be surprised. I like pizza a lot.
But what would be your preference in style, though?
Oh, I would lean towards a thinner crust versus a deep dish.
Okay.
I can see it in Richard's future. You know, being on the water out there in Seattle, he'd probably be that guy who would put anchovies on his pizza.
I have been known to do this and enjoy it.
So there's always that guy. There's always
that
that
guy.
anchovy guy. All right. Question number 4. I will take, even though we're probably on question number 600 by now, but whatever. Hey, it's our show, Rich. We can do whatever we want. Okay. Question number 4. If you were standing in the African plains and you were being charged by a rhinoceros, would you turn and run, or would you climb a tree? Or would you try to fight it?
I would probably try to climb a tree. At my age, I'm not going to. I can't run that fast. And hopefully it's a big tree so that it would take him a while to hit it down with his horn. I would not try to fight it. You know, there is a phrase that I learned from a game some 40 plus years ago when I made a move in the game, and it came back with a response that said "stupid but brave." So I don't think I'd be trying that one. So that would mostly be what I would try. Yeah, but then the question becomes is, what the hell are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere being charged by a rhinoceros?
That is another question for another day.
Know? Yeah, now, were you out here looking for a cloudberry tree?
You're trying to establish your own cloudberry farm.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the new area of growth. And they can only grow there in the safari. They're very
That's it. That's it.
Good. All right, Rich. My question was ridiculous, so I will give you question number 5.
So, and I don't want to get you in trouble again here, Randolph, but you've lived in a number of different cities, some big cities, and so I do wonder, do you have a most and least favorite of the different places in the country here that you've lived?
I lived in all of them at a different part of my life. When I was a young man, I lived in New York City just about the time when dance clubs was popular, and that was a fantastic period, being able to walk out of your apartment in the city and at 10, 11 o'clock at night and go dancing someplace. And when you walk out of the club, it would be the Sunday morning and the sun is up. That was a fantastic experience, you know, just meeting people. Then later on, when I lived in Houston, I was again, it was warm, you know, still a younger person and not married. And I just loved the culture of the place. I mean, Texas is a wonderful place to live. The people are friendly and they're very, you know, they are proud to be Texans. And if you can buy into the experience, which I did because when I was a kid, I watched so many Westerns that when I went to different places in Texas, I felt like I'd been there carrying 6-shooters in another life. But I truly embraced that. But I have found that one of the easiest places to live is Chicago. And that happens because of it's a city that's all in one landmass. We've got access to water, so we've got the lake. And if in certain places where I actually drive by the lake, I can pretend that I'm looking over at the ocean, at the Caribbean Sea in Jamaica. So I can drift away to that. But because of that one landmass and being relatively close to downtown, it is relatively easy to get around. They've got a great transportation system. The people are friendly. If you are friendly, they'll respond to you in such a way. And now when the winter comes, everybody's in a hurry, so nobody stops to talk to you too much in that regard. But it's actually a great place to live from that point of view. Now we have issues lately with violence, crime, and which they're publicizing to the nth degree. In the area of the city that I live in, I'm not exposed to that. So I can't, so that's not a part of that's not something I fear on a daily basis. We do have a situation where the taxes are getting a little bit out of whack and it's scaring the heck out of some people. But my contention is as long as we've got a natural resource, which is water, our city will survive. And if you had to, based on my experiences, if you had to pick me up and drop me in one city out of the ones that I've lived in, I'd want to be dropped into Chicago.
Interesting. Well, great responses. Great question, Rich. And Randolph, if we get you back, I'm gonna not ask any more questions, but there's a couple I want to ask you about Jamaica, because I know you. How much of your life did you say you spent there?
I lived there until I was 13, but I've been there I've been back on numerous occasions. As a matter of fact, I just this year, before the pandemic hit, I actually took my 3 daughters back to Jamaica. That was a deferred Christmas present. I mean, I don't want to sound selfish or anything, but I took them to Jamaica for my birthday. Guys got to work at angles,
That's right. Might as well.
And we had a wonderful time, and this was their first time going back to Jamaica as adults. And we arranged it with my relatives that were there, so we actually had a mini reception where they met 30 of their relatives that they'd never met before.
Oh, that's so cool.
I mean, met as adults. So it was wonderful. We got some pictures of that, created them. And then the other thing too is I drove them around. I actually rented a car and we drove them around to show them places where I had spent time as a child, show them the old house I used to live in, show them where I went to school and so on. And unfortunately, some of my relatives were able to tell them stories about how bad a child I was. And some of my children, I think they may think a little bit less of me today, but it was a wonderful experience.
That's cool. I've spent some time in Jamaica. That's why I wanted to ask you some questions for the next time I go, because I've had been there a couple times. I've had a couple of great experiences there. Really cool country, really great people. Rich, have you ever been to Jamaica?
I haven't, no.
So something to put on your bucket list. But we'll save those questions for the next time Randolph's on, because we need to wrap this show up. So our next segment that we have is my museum pick. So Randolph, you know a little bit about me. We've known each other for a little while now. What you may not know though is I have a vast assortment of old things that are still in my possession. I have a very difficult time throwing things away that have screens, LCD screens, buttons, or requires electricity. I call it a hobby. My wife would call it some kind of serious mental issue. Either way, it's for everybody's enjoyment. So right before the show, I was like, I didn't have time to figure out a museum pick, but I had a couple minutes, and I'm like, oh look, Rich, here's some drawers. I haven't opened these in a while. Let's see what's inside of them. Okay. So one of my drawers contained an interesting item that I think I can talk about for a second. And not all of these, Randolph, are PC related or industry related. Many of them are. But I've also been a big gamer my whole life, really into video games. And one of the things about video game systems back in the day is that controllers were wired. They had big cords on them, usually 6 feet or 7 or 8 feet, and you'd plug it into the machine and that cord would stretch across the living room. And that was like the de facto standard. Well, I didn't like cords, and so I decided to get something that Nintendo released at some point in the NES's life cycle, which was called the NES Satellite. So it is this gigantic box that included a 4-port tap, and it came a little later into the life cycle, but it was a 4-port tap, but it was also an infrared, basically wireless system to turn your kind of wired controllers into a wireless system. Now the controller was still wired, but the wired part would plug in here. And where it was useful is if your console was like on the far end of the room and it was kind of far away. So you could set this on the coffee table in front of you, just plug into this, and then the console could be on there. You don't have these giant cords. And then this would have to plug in on the Nintendo on the other side. So Randolph, were you ever into video games at all? Did you ever play them all?
I was never a big gamer. Remember, now I got into this business for productivity, and people who played games were just wasting their life away.
So that's what my mother told me too.
I had a conversation with your mother. She reminded me to tell you that.
Yeah, I heard that lecture often, but it's a fun gadget. And it kind of this is one of the catalysts that started to drive controllers towards more of the wireless. Now that didn't become a standard feature on video game consoles until what was the first console that had I believe it was the Xbox 360 that came with wireless controllers out of the box. And I'm pretty sure somebody's going to fact check me on that. And I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was where it became standard. But there was adapters like this, even going back as far as the NES days, to turn those controllers wireless, which is a cool thing. And this thing did not plug in. This thing, Rich, believe it or not, took like, what does it take? It takes 6 C-cell batteries to run this thing.
Whoa.
Now they would last a long time though. I do remember that, like, I did not have to change the batteries often, but I do remember that when I had to change the batteries, I was like, holy cow, that's a lot of C-cell batteries for basically something that just blinks lights to this thing over there on the other side. So a pretty cool one to talk about. So that is my museum pick. My tech pick is a similar kind of adapter thing, but for pre-existing wireless controllers, but to use them with a Windows PC. So my museum, or my tech pick, not my museum pick, my tech pick is the Xbox wireless adapter for Windows PCs. So I'm going to go ahead and for those who are watching, I will put this up here on the screen for you to see what it looks like. And what this little device allows you to do, it's $25, and it allows you to pair Xbox One wireless controllers and use them with a PC. Now, Microsoft does sell a corded PC version of that remote control, but I do not believe, and they probably have a wireless one that comes with the adapter. But if you already have an Xbox One and you want to use that controller for playing PC games, you can just buy this little adapter there and plug it into your PC, and away you go. Poof! You have wireless controllers for playing games on Steam or other games from other places. So, Rich, how many are you going to get?
Well, I've already got 6, so who needs more?
Yeah, that's true. That's a lot of them. You probably now you have 6 controllers or 6 adapters.
6 controllers.
That would make a lot more sense than 6 adapters, because if you have 6 adapters, I would be like, you need to really reprioritize how you spend your money, because I wouldn't understand that. So that is my museum pick, the NES Satellite 4-port wireless adapter for the original NES, and my tech pick, the Xbox wireless adapter for Windows 10. Rich, things happened last week, as you said. We weren't able to do a show last week because we had our that was the ChannelPro SMB Forum September online event that we did. So that was on a Thursday. We weren't able to do our regular recording slot, so we missed last week. So there's probably a lot to cover of what people might have missed. And then, like I said, you're going to disappoint everybody because you're not actually going to pull out the goofy hat with the crystal ball, but you are going to still tell us what might happen next week.
Yeah, well, you know what? In our weekly In Case You Missed It post, which is written by ChannelPro's James Gaskin, published every Friday, we don't even have to go back to last week. There's plenty from this week for him to talk about, including, we were talking about Nutanix before. They held their big user conference for 2020 online, of course, this week. So there's actually a fair amount of news out of Nutanix that James is going to be writing about. There's some new remote learning technology from ViewSonic that came out this week just in time for schools reopening. And he's also got a story about a driver in Kentucky who just might have avoided getting busted for driving with fake license plates if he had not hand-drawn the fake license plates with magic markers. And James can explain how that all came together. Looking ahead to next week, the virtual online 2020 edition of SpiceWorld's SpiceWorks conference for IT professionals is taking place. Usually some stories, some product announcements will come out of that in a lot of years. HP, I can't talk about it yet, but HP is going to be announcing a whole bunch of stuff next week, and I'm going to be interviewing some folks from Dell about some of what they've been up to recently and what they've got coming up in the quarter ahead too. So news from HP and Dell next week.
Sounds exciting.
Hey.
You won't want to miss it. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up episode 159. I want to give a big thank you to our guest host today, Randolph Carnegie from Ken-Kor Consulting, managing director there. Randolph, thanks for being on. If people wanted to learn more about you, learn more about Ken-Kor Consulting, where can they go? How can they find you?
Simply go to ken-kor.com. That's our website. They can find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. If you're in the Chicago area, they've got a street named after me, Randolph. And if you happen to be in Cleveland, they've got a street named Carnegie named after me. So if you just put those two cities together, you'll find me.
Yes, it works that way. That's amazing.
Yeah,
and they named those streets after you.
And to think of, and they're both located on water, you know, one is on Lake Michigan and I think the other one's on Lake Erie. So, you know, what's the poor guy from Jamaica to do with that much water?
That's amazing. That's amazing. What I mean, we had such a high profile guest on that. They named streets after this guy. This is amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's so difficult being humble.
That's awesome. Well, if you want to find ChannelPro Network, the way to do that is to set your browser homepage to open up channelpronetwork.com. Each and every time you pop that browser open, there you'll find articles, news, white papers, downloads, all kinds of really, really important stuff to help you improve your business, grow your business, keep in touch, and on track of what is going on in the industry. If you want to find us on the socials, we are Channel Pro Network on Facebook and LinkedIn. We are at Channel Pro SMB on Twitter. If you want to follow Rich, he is
At Rich Free.
If you want to follow me, I am at Matt Whitlock on Twitter. You can get us there. And of course, one of the best ways to also take Channel Pro with you while you're on the go is to subscribe to Channel Pro Weekly. You can find it on Google Play Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. Subscribe, and then the episodes magically appear on your device when you're ready to listen to them. So if you're out in the yard or doing dishes or going between work sites or listening in the office, if you are going back to an office still, either way, it can be there with you. If you like to watch, we are on YouTube. You can subscribe there, hit that red button and the little bell so you get notifications when we have new episodes. Big thanks again to Randolph Carnegie from Ken-Kor Consulting for being on with us. And we will see you all in episode 160 next week.